we have a physiological stress algorithm. And so I can go out and do a lot of extreme exercise. So you can imagine a 30-minute vigorous exercise versus 3 or 4 hours of, ups and downs of high stress. It's still the same impact on the heart.
Just to talk about HRV, heart rate variability, because not many people will know too much about this, unless they're probably really into wearables or something. But so just correct me if I'm wrong. If you've got high HRV, then that's a good thing, I think, isn't it? If you've got low heart rate variability, then there's potentially a problem. Is that typically, in a very simplistic terms, that's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah, the higher the heart rate variability, the better. And heart rate variability, so your heart has a natural variation from beat to beat. And the heart is part of the autonomous nervous system. And if you've ever heard the term fight or flight, sometimes we're in a really restful state. It could be sleep, it could be, taking an hour's rest lying on the sofa. Your body's effectively and your mind is recovering and resting. And then sometimes we're all go, it might be work, at meetings, actually exercise as well. But ultimately you want to have a form of sort of stasis where, you're getting a nice balance of each. So whenever we're doing something that's, nervous, it may be presenting a job interview, we effectively go into that fight mode where all our systems effectively react faster. Our heart can sometimes beat faster. The variability goes down. We become effectively like a robot executing on what we need to do. So your heart now goes into a very sort of, fixed state of beat to beat. And, because you're in this sort of this sympathetically dominant state, because you're in a sort of a nervous environment, or you're excited or whatever it is, but you're geared up, you're ready. And then when you're in a relaxed state, everything sort of calms down and the heart variability starts to increase. So the more you can have that sort of higher heart rate variability, the more indication that, you are getting the rest that you need. And a lot of us these days, unfortunately, are stressed, we're not sleeping enough, we're using our devices too much, and all of those actually have an impact on heart rate variability. We've got some fascinating projects with clinical partners and academic partnerships and customers as well around heart rate variability and stress. Some really interesting things are coming out of it.
Sure. So that's really interesting. So if you're constantly in this fight mode, in this stressed, amped up mode, that's obviously a bad thing then, yeah? And it's probably a bad thing if you're constantly in a sort of a low stress mode all the time, because you need to have a split of both, I suppose, yeah?
Ideally, you have a split. It's worse, obviously, if you're in a constant state of stress. And in fact, there's a statistic from Harvard that 2% of US GDP is written off of the US economy due to work-related stress.
Good God. Wow.
If you think about the billions that is. And I think that the first thing is recognizing when you're in, this sort of state, when you're recognizing that you're not sleeping enough, recognizing that you're stressed about something. It starts with the recognition in the first place. And things like, the latest generation of wearables and what's coming as well give you some of this insight. But the key point of all of these things is it needs to be accurate. And we have seen with other technologies and a lot of existing technologies is the accuracy is not very good. So if people are going to make changes or use this data as part of their ability to recover from something or get better at something, then the technology needs to be accurate. And a lot of the wearable companies know this. And the generation of wearables today is much better than the generation of wearables a few years ago. And you may see this even in step count, which people sort of mostly associate with wearables, but there is much more capability and functionality being put into devices like those.
Yeah, sure.
They are effectively becoming medical devices.
Absolutely. So look, we'll come back to the tech in a minute, but I really want to dig into this because I think people don't know about this. And it's obviously, stress is obviously an enormous cause of cardiovascular disease then, yeah? Is it the biggest cause, would you say, Adrian?
No, and there's not enough data to be able to back that up. We know it has been recognized formally that stress is linked to cardiovascular disease, but in terms of the magnitude of it, that information, that data is not here yet. And part of what our technology is doing is I suppose bridging that gap, creating the capability to understand understand this, but cardiovascular disease, there's many different reasons from it. There's the genetic aspect, there's the lifestyle aspect. But when a heart-related condition is diagnosed, in many aspects it can be fixed accordingly. If atrial fibrillation is diagnosed, there is drugs that can be taken. There's a relatively harmless procedure called a cardioversion that can take place. But again, the issue that we're seeing is that you can't fix that problem you can't see. So, people don't get ECGs unless they feel something's not right, or there's some event, or they're in a hospital for another reason. What we're trying to do with our technology is to get it out to everybody, and not just people with the most expensive wearables, the cheapest wearables. And that sort of early indication of something going wrong can save your life. We did. I'll give you an example. We did an event in London last year, and we had, I think, 30 people demo our technology, and 3 people had some form of arrhythmia just by having a demo.
Arrhythmia is an irregular heartbeat, yeah?
A regular heartbeat, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was 10% effectively of the people who tried out our technology, and we found something that, if they don't treat, will eventually lead to potentially a stroke, for example.
Oh my God, wow. It's incredible, isn't it? There's something stuck in my mind when we spoke before, Adrian. You told me about how there's kind of a potential, the next wave of heart problems is not going to come from the places we think. So obviously alcohol abuse, drug abuse, that's obviously going to cause, heart issues. But there's also, on the other extreme, in terms of these extreme events and these ultra marathon runners and stuff like that, they're not doing their heart any favors either, are they? Isn't that what you told me?
Yeah, I mean, the heart is a muscle, and it can be overworked. And you need to know the extremes of your body and what it's capable of doing. And there's actually a term called athlete's heart. So we're seeing stories every so often, because they're famous people, of a footballer that has to stop playing football, or an NBA basketball player that's had an arrhythmia diagnosed, or things like that. So there are people who can have heart-related conditions, always have had them, and then there are people who can develop them for various different reasons. From a physiological point of view, there's genetic reasons and everything else. But also, you can effectively train too much and not look after yourself, and for all the various different reasons. So if you speak to some cardiologists, they will see people who have got damage to their heart based on the fact that they are extreme athletes.
Nobody knows about it. I mean, everyone assumes, they're really fit and healthy. Yeah. But I suppose it's about extremities, isn't it? It's about taking it too far.
Absolutely.
Do you think it comes back down to, Adrian, people, in the same way that the crazy stressed businessman doesn't probably rest enough, it's the same with the athletes, is that they don't give their body enough downtime? Is that essentially, do you know what I mean? If people manage that split better, didn't overtrain, didn't overwork, we'd probably see an enormous reduction in cardiovascular disease. Do you think that's pretty much what we're talking about, isn't it?
We would certainly see a reduction. I mean, the majority of the people who are suffering from cardiovascular disease, lifestyle is a big aspect of that, and that's not, typically over extremes of exercise. It's all about balance. But what can happen is that the heart in itself, and the heart rate variability measurements and stress measurements, all can give indications. So to give you an example of this, we have a physiological stress algorithm, and so I can go out and do a lot of extreme exercise, and it'll show my heart rate and my heart rate zones, and it'll show my heart rate variability, and that's fine. But that's supposed to be a short burst of activity. Now, if I'm worried about something, I'm worried about my job or money or whatever it is, the heart reacts actually the same way. So you can imagine a 30-minute, vigorous exercise versus 3 or 4 hours of ups and downs of high stress. It's still the same impact on the heart.
Yeah, sure.
So this is why it's really important to be aware of what's going on within your mind and your body, and how that's translating into measurements like ECG.